Hello Tamers, Cyberdrop back in day, and on to day 2, on to Deckless Countdown towards EX10 Sinister Order's release, with the deck that we're going to be going over today being the newly upgraded Aquatic deck, following the support it got from BT22, with this deck definitely making waves following the new support reveals, as the deck now functions a lot more cohesively compared to back then following the Special Booster 2.0 format, and going further with the small support from BT21. And well, before we dive on in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this around to help with the algorithm, as we jump right on in to the deck profile. And then onto the egg deck. Well, going over that now. For the main egg for the deck, I end up going for 4 full playset of BT7 Bukamon. Since, well, another aspect of the deck, besides loading in sources underneath your stacks, is the ability to also play out from stack. Thus, this Bukamon definitely synergizes well, as it allows for efficient memory gain to ensure you keep turn as you climb. Though, as another option that you could take in as either 5th egg or placement egg is the new BT22 Puyoyomon that came with the new iteration of the line. Since this Puyoyo ends up draws 1 whenever a source gets added, a Aqua Sea Animal trait gets added to its sources, keeping the hand pretty healthy as you load up sources into it to be used later for your high-end plays. And that's it for the eggs. Now on to the rookie lineup. Well, for the most part, it ends up being a full Sangomon core, since in Liberator fashion, full playset of the BT19 Songo and the BT21 as the Searcher and Evolution Reduction respectively, and both give an end of attack inherent to gain back 1 memory, playing into memory efficiency for the climb. And throughout the lineup is the new BT22 Songo, whose on play allows it to immediately add itself his source of any of your Aqua Sea Animal trait, and then grants them blocker and battle protection until the end of opponent's turn, also being a jammer inherent. And for the most part, this is pretty much a pretty solid lineup for the deck. And well, that's it for the rookies. Now on to level 4s. And for this part, it ends up being one of the more loaded parts considering how the deck runs. Going over the line itself, being a 3-2-1 split between the old BT19 shell, the promo shell, and the new BT22 shell. Since, well, for the most part, BT19 being your Tamer cheat, Liberator, also granting another gain 1 at the end of attack inherit. The promo shell being able to on play when Digivolve add in any level 5 or lower source from hand, any level 5 or lower Aqua Sea Animal from hand to source for another draw, while being a end of attack draw 1. And then to round that off, being the BT22 shell, being a decode body, which pairs well with any other combos you have, since as long as there's a level 3 source underneath, if it were to ever loop play, you immediately get to play out that level 3 source. With the on play when digivolving being a lot more flexible compared to the promo shell, as it'll just give any Digimon on your side that source instead, as well as being a jamming inherent. And then to follow up on the level 4 lineup, the supporting cast ends up being 2 copies of the X6 Shigemon, and then 2 copies of BT18 Lonomon. Since, for the most part, Shike here definitely plays into the source played from source effects. Since Shike is on play, regardless, is draw 1, but if it gets played out from source, you gain back 1 memory, which pairs well, considering that we also have another part of the line in here, as well as being another jamming inherent. And then Lonomon being in here for hybrid for game, as well as being able to make a line that ends up further searching, since she'll on play 1 Digivolving, top deck 3, and add any Aqua or Sea Animal trait to source or to hand while decking the rest, as well as being a cheeky inherent to bounce any level 3 Digimon board, either yours or your opponent's. So get rid of floodgates, though it ends up, sending it back to hand instead of being a lot more trickier than that. Though, for another option, you could find an excuse to run a copy of the old, good old 15 BT15 Digimon, being a rush body that also grants a jamming inherent, since it can immediately go in and go for face as well when played out through the effects, as well as being another jamming inherent for the deck. And that's it for the level 4 lineup. Now on to level 5s. And, considering that we run Pokemon, the main core level 5 for this deck is the full playset of EX6 Huan-Kun. As you immediately get, as soon as you get into it, you just spit back out any of your Songos, then trigger off Buka, and effectively make it a 2-cost evolution. Since you on play on Digivolve, it allows you to spit back out of body from source, as well as the usual main aggro build inherit to place any 1 Digimon board to then unsuspend. And then following this up, ends up being a 2-1 split between the old BT19 Marine Bull and the old BT22 Marine Bull, as both end up pretty much seeing some also useful abilities for the deck, since old BT19 being able to be a decode body, as well as being able to place a Digimon, any Digimon with the Aqua Sea Animal trait from hand to, as any of your Digimon's bottom source. While the new BT22 one ends up being the usual warping one, being able to warp over a Songo as long as you have a Yao, warping over a Songo by taking a shell from trash, as long as you have Yao on board. Thus making some plays as well. Well, with both Marine Bulls being decode bodies, and granting a end of attack inherit to also spit back out a level 4 lower body from sources without paying cost. Though, another thing you could choose to push in is the EX8 Mega Digimon. Since it's on play, 1 Digivolving definitely can come in handy, since once it comes out, it allows any of your Digimon to unsuspend. And then also having 1 attack ability that could come in handy to stun opposing Digimon while you're sitting at 1 or more memory, as well as also having the same inherent as Huan-Kun. And that's it for level 5s. Now on to level 6s. As instead, for the main core, ends up being 3 copies of the new BT22 Ryugamon in place of the old BT19 one, 2 copies of Xiangpeng, and 1 copy of Melseizure Ace for my level 6 lineup. since for the most part, between the old Ryugu and this Ryugu, it's a lot more memory efficient for what the deck wants to do, since it'll be able to Digivolve up for 3 cost, has Decode into a level 5 Aquatic Sea Animal, with the on-play when Digivolving to allow itself to place any level 5 or lower Aquatic Sea Animal in order for it to, as bomb source, and then stuns one opposing Digimon or Tamer till the end of their turn, with its Altern's effect allowing it to also bounce a opposing level 5 or lower to bot deck. Which actually pairs well, considering that in your the new top end as well, this actually can come into play given that your top end does have Decode, thus triggering off its full line effects. Then BT19 Champagne here is definitely a pretty wild card, given that it's more so a beat stick / blocker, being a Sec +1 body, as well with the useful ability to play with memory, since on Digivolve effectively can make its evolution reduced down to 2, as long as you have another Digimon to then slot in as the bomb source, to gain back 3 memory. And then Melcedra Ace here, definitely to also play around with your new top end, since Melcedra Ace could come out through Decode and foregoing any backlash from the overflow, and is pretty good to also act as removal, since it'll be able to blast Digivolve, and the on-play on Digivolve is a Digivolve 3 to then bot deck an opposing cost 7 or lower Digimon, with an all turns protection that allows, with an all turns floodgate that prevents opposing Digimon from spending while you're sitting at 1 or more memory, thus being a real powerful way to stun the opponent's board, while also managing to go for game. Though from there, for tech picks for level 6s, I definitely still see some reason to include the old BT19 Ryugu in the lineup as a more, powerful removal, since on Digivolve it gets to play out. Also goes for wider boards as well, since on Digivolve, you're able to play out a level 4 lower Digimon from source, and then in turn allows you to return any Digimon board to then return opposing Digimon as high or lower level than you also bot decked. With this definitely playing into more so combo play, given that, you'll be playing this and most likely using this as a way to remove something and hopefully decoding into a level 5 to get that benefit off of those on plays. Then from there, I've also seen some weird way to actually add in Giga Digimon from BT20, since the deck can also be, engineered to be a Digimon deck, as you can already tell already. With Giga Digimon here definitely playing into a more wide board build, since, being able to be a Sec +1 body, reboot and blocker, and being able to constantly spit back out a body as long as Melcedra, spit back out cards from sources as long as you have a Digimon name in there, a male Digimon name in there. With the Alternates effect, to dish out a Digivolve 2 on opposing Digimon. And that's it for my look on the level 6s. Now on to the high end of the deck, that being level 7. As for the top end, ends up being 3 copies of the new BT22 Ariemon. And, well, just like with Nyabumon for puppets, Ariemon can come out for 4 cost over your low 6s, or alternatively, as long as you have Yao on board, can Digivolve for 6 over Marine Bull. Though, in retrospect, your best mileage with this is definitely pretty much just go for the straight climb to make full benefits as well. For one Digivolving effect, she gets to allow you to play out 1 level 3, 4, and 5 Aquatic animal from source with paying their cost, and then can immediately, on Digivolve or when attacking, place 1 Digimon on board as bomb sources to then bot deck an opposing Digimon, and then allows herself to unsuspend, which plays well considering other tactics that you could go with, especially considering that with Huan Kun, it's a more, given its wording inherent, it's a you may effect, so given timing, you could sequence your turn to make Ari attack multiple times due to that. As well, if you spit out the source, or having already used the inherent prior, you could just, well, slide back in, and you get to use that inherent once again. And then that wraps up for Digimon. Now on to Tamers. Well, for the most part, it's a full Yao lineup, being a 2-3-1 split between the old BT19 Yao, the promo Yao, and then the new BT22 Yao. As for the most part, BT19 being able to, well, be the memory center and allow you to slot in sources from hand on attack, while promo Yao here being the passive memory gain, as well as allowing, well, whenever she sees one of your Digimon gain a source through effect, she manually can suspend herself down to then allow that Digimon to Digivolve up into another Aqua or Aqua or Sea animal, reducing the cost by 1. And the new BT22 Yao here, or so being a wild card in a sense, being able to place herself out for any other Yaos at the start of your main phase, while also cheating out a Songo if you're on an empty board when you activate the effect, but is more so used for Ultron's effect to pretty much refill, well, keep your hand healthy by drawing you one whenever one of your Digimons gain a source through effect. And that's it for Tamer lineup. Now on to options to round off. Start, and I ended up going for the normal utility split of 2-2-1 between the mental training, Blue Man Boost, and Blue Scramble. Again, normal uses. Mental training for a small dig, also being a evolution reduction for later on. Blue Man Boost for deeper digging, and 2 memory for later on. And Blue Scramble for immediate evolution, and then be able to recur pieces in case the need arises for its delay. And then from there, rounding us off is the 2 copies of Yao's unique emblem, Pacity Lagoon, which, just like with the Orisa, well, just like with Fable Waltz, being able to allow you to cheat out Nosango or Yao from hand or trash, paying cost, and having a delay that triggers in response to Yao's spending, allowing that Digimon, well, any Digimon on your board, with the archetypal traits, to evolve into an archetypal trait and Liberator, which ends up being your top end most of the time, and reducing that evolution by 3. As for other options obviously, one thing is Hammer Spark for need memory when you need it. And also one thing that I've been contemplating is the old Watatsumi Purification from BT19. Allowing you to, for its main effect, return a level 4 lower to bot deck, opposing level 4 lower to bot deck, and then by returning one of your own blue Digimon to bot deck, you get to instead hit any level 6 or lower to bot deck instead. And this definitely having its own niche uses given your board state, since it could since it obviously can pair well with Decode. And that's it for the deck itself. Now on to combos. And then before going into combos as usual, going over the starting hand, since you definitely need a strong open for this deck, as you pretty much do want to at least see your pieces to climb up. Though thankfully, given how the deck functions, you don't need to solely rely on one Digivolving effects, since most of your effects can be used later through being played out from being played from source. As pretty much the main idea is obviously any two of your rookies, then a level 4 to climb into, with shells definitely being, with the BT19 shell definitely being one you'd want to see paired going into with a Yao in hand to then have your Yaos established for later. And then seeing Pizzy Lagoon and the other utility options to, help set up your foundation as you, continue to see your pieces to help tempo climb up your line, and ending off with either level 6 with your most explosive turns being able to go into Ariemon, who then will, pretty much spit back out all the sources, most of the sources underneath her, to then trigger off multiple effects. With the main key here definitely being how you time your effects as well. And, that's it for my discussion on how what you want to see through your opening hand. Now on to the actual combos. For the most part, the main idea of the deck is pretty much straightforward, since the main idea is just stack building, as you pretty much push out, and can also be a bit cheeky with your swings early on, considering that once you've established stuff like a Yao, a BT19 Yao in play, you can also, most of your swings can be, further boosted by your jamming inherits, thus at least triggering off end of attack inherits from your sources that aren't your jamming sources, to then allow you to keep turn and then climb up. The main idea definitely being, given Hong-Kun's being the core, being able to make use of the Hong-Kun and Buka pairing to also tempo up and be able to get the on-play effects of BT22 or BT19 Songo off of Hong-Kun. And then you have your myriad top ends plays. Since, obviously going into Hong-Kun dashes your options a bit, considering that Ari requires a Marine Bowl to warp into. Though you have the other options of level 6s to also make plays. Since for the most part, you have your blocker body that effectively comes on 2 evolution, as long as you have another body suck in, or set up for Melseja play, or climb efficiently with Ryugu, also taking out bomb decking something else in the process. Since the main idea is pretty much a very, or more streamlined stack, I'd say. For this example, any of your level 4s, any of each of your stack to work with. Since, for the most part, the main explosive plays are when you're sitting at your level 6s. As with established Pasilla Lagoon on board, and any Yao to trigger off, though BT19 Yao is definitely the more common play to go about it. Since you swing with your level 6, any of your level 6s, BT19 Yao goes off, adds a source underneath, and then Lagoon will then trigger, popping itself for its delay, and making that swing into a Ariemon. Thus, you get to trigger off Ariemon's main effects, excuse me, to then spit back out a level 3, 4, or 5 from source, and immediately trigger off effects. And given how you built the stack thus far, you get a myriad of effects to work with going into it to then trigger off, and depending on what you need in the situation, can also choose to use Ari to then grab back in a source to then unsuspend once again. With the main idea, definitely playing around with Huang Kun's as a crux for the deck to be very aggro, since more bodies on board to make use of Huang Kun, you can have turns where you triggered off the effect earlier at some point before dropping an Ari or going into Ari to establish it. Since you'll unsuspend for the one Digimon effect, and then swing again, and take in another source to then trigger the Huang Kun effect. Since, once again, given that you play out from source, you're effective, and once you've already used the inherit, you pretty much effectively get to reset all of your inherits through this combo play, as you spit back out bodies from source to then take them back in again to effectively reload on their inherit effect. The main idea definitely being to swing in with jamming bodies to ensure your stacks remain on board. Though, once again, I do want to preface that main weakness of this deck is definitely keeping your hand healthy to ensure that you have sources to load up, or for resources later on, lest you end up losing steam in the process. Though, that has been my look at the BT22 format for the Aqua deck, with it actually being a lot more fun compared to back when it was the Special Booster 2.0 format, considering how much more limited it was, and how much its identity definitely overly relied on decode. With this definitely striking that better balance of making use of your resources. But yeah, once again, that has been my look at the deck following the BT22 format. And for closing off, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this around to help keep up with the content. And this is Sarah signing off.